These are the papyrus scrolls of Herculaneum. They don't look like books. They look like chunks of charcoal, like fossils of words. 1,800 ancient scrolls, flash-seared by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, entombed in the only library to survive from the ancient world. For centuries, they were a symbol of a loss so profound it felt absolute. Blackened cylinders of ash that crumbled to dust at the slightest touch. To try and open one was to destroy it. An entire library of thought from the age of Caesar and Cicero, lost to fire and time. But now, thanks to technology more powerful than anything available even 5 years ago, the impossible is happening. Words are emerging from pure darkness, and what they say is forcing historians to question everything we thought we knew about Rome's final days and the people who witnessed its collapse. Inside a sealed lab at the Diamond Light Source in Oxford, a charred black cylinder, no bigger than a wine bottle, sat at the heart of a machine built to pierce atoms. For the team of researchers gathered around it, this was a moment centuries in the making. The scroll, designated P. Herc 172, was too fragile to open, too carbonized to read by any conventional means. But this time, it wouldn't be human hands doing the work. It would be photons. For the first time, a beam of light 100 billion times brighter than the sun was about to pass through it. The first scan came through. The monitors displayed only static gray bands, the papyrus layers flattened by 2 millennia of pressure. The room was silent. Then an engineer adjusted the beam's phase, and on the screen, faint shadows began to take shape. Not just marks, but letters. Ancient Greek, symbols of disgust, fear, and life, hidden in the blackness for nearly 2,000 years. Dr. Brent Seals, a computer scientist from the University of Kentucky, described the mission as teaching a machine to see through time. For decades, he and others had been chasing a paradox. How do you read dark ink on dark papyrus? The volcanic heat had turned everything, the plant fiber and the carbon ink, the same uniform shade of black. There was no contrast. Until this moment. The breakthrough wasn't finding the ink. It was realizing the ink sat higher than the papyrus, elevated by microscopic fractions of a millimeter. They weren't reading color. They were reading texture. The ancient scribes had accidentally created a 3-dimensional text preserved in carbon that could only be decoded by technology that wouldn't exist for 2 millennia. The Oxford breakthrough cracked the code, but it didn't open the floodgates. That required a new kind of archaeology. In 2023, the Vesuvius Challenge was launched, a global competition with a $700,000 grand prize. The goal? Unleash the power of artificial intelligence to do what centuries of scholarship had failed to achieve: read the unreadable. Thousands of miles apart, students and programmers began feeding the X-ray data into deep learning algorithms. The scans looked like chaos, twisted, crushed waves of papyrus, but the AI was trained to find order. In early 2024, 3 students from different continents achieved the impossible. Their algorithms detected over 2,000 ancient Greek letters inside one of the unopened scrolls. Not fragments, not guesses, complete, readable text. They had won the prize, but more importantly, they proved the scrolls could talk. The first words to emerge were not random: bios, phobos, hedone. Life, fear, pleasure. The AI flagged it immediately. These were not just isolated words, but themes. The handwriting matched a known pattern, that of Philodemus, an Epicurean philosopher from the 1st century BCE. His works were known to be in the villa, but no one knew what this particular scroll contained.
The answer was startling. The text was a lost section of his work on vices, a 10-book exploration of human flaws. Greed, arrogance, flattery, disgust. To Philodemus, vice wasn't sin, it was imbalance, a distortion of human nature. He wrote of self-control and friendship in an empire that was beginning to worship excess. This wasn't just philosophy, it was psychology, centuries ahead of its time. The words disgust and fear, visible on the scans, felt eerily visceral. The tone wasn't detached or academic, it read like a warning. But why was this exploration of moral decay preserved in a private library? And who owned it? The villa of the papyri belonged to Lucius Calpurnius Piso, the father-in-law of Julius Caesar, a man at the very center of Rome's most dangerous political moment. As scientists decoded more fragments, a second voice began to surface from the ashes, one not concerned with human weakness, but with history itself. This discovery would shatter the idea that the scrolls were purely philosophical, revealing a text so politically charged it seems to have been deliberately erased from history.
The next scroll didn't speak of emotion, it spoke of war. When researchers fed new scans into their software, they expected more of Philodemus. Instead, what appeared were unfamiliar Latin sequences. The words bellorum civilium, of the civil wars, repeated through the data, woven into what looked like an eyewitness account. Then came the signature that sent a shockwave through the academic world: Seneca. For centuries, historians believed that Seneca the Elder's most ambitious work, A History of the Roman Civil Wars, was completely lost. Only scattered references survived. And now fragments of it were appearing on a screen, unearthed from a charred scroll. Think about the timing. Seneca the Elder lived through the civil wars and witnessed the Republic's collapse. He wrote it all down, but his history vanished from the record so completely that not a single copy survived. That level of erasure doesn't happen by accident. Histories get lost through neglect or fire. They get erased through intention. Yet somehow, one copy may have survived, hidden in the private library of Caesar's father-in-law, in a villa that would be buried by Vesuvius before anyone could destroy it. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a pattern. Suddenly, the purpose of the library becomes clear. Piso, a man at the nexus of power, wasn't just collecting philosophy for leisure. He was building an archive. He was documenting the Republic's implosion in real time. On one shelf, Philodemus's analysis of the moral decay that makes tyranny possible. On another, Seneca's chronicle of the civil wars that decay unleashed. Philosophy as diagnosis, history as evidence. This villa wasn't just a home, it was a vault designed to preserve a truth too dangerous for its time. And the scrolls themselves hold the key. Within the recovered texts, certain Greek words repeat with unsettling consistency, forming a moral anatomy of collapse. Bios, life itself. In Philodemus's philosophy, it was the measure of a life lived rightly, guided by reason. But in these recovered lines, bios is shadowed by phobos, fear, the fear that corrodes judgment. Senators feared losing status more than they feared losing the republic. Then comes hedon, pleasure. Once the Epicurean pursuit of peace, it had mutated into indulgence and spectacle. The text pairs hedon with sorrow, suggesting that pleasure without measure always ends in emptiness. And beneath it all runs epidemia, desire, the hunger for power, for dominance, for more. It is the same theme Seneca's chronicle echoes, a society driven not by virtue, but by appetite. Together, these words sketch a portrait of a civilization devouring itself. The scrolls make the connection brutally clear.
The wars of ambition that Seneca recorded were not accidents of power. They were the inevitable outcome of inner decay. The Republic fell not because enemies stormed its gate, but because fear, desire, and pleasure had already conquered its soul.
Today, more than half of the villa of the papyri remains buried. Ground-penetrating surveys show chambers still sealed, rooms untouched since the day Vesuvius erupted. Each new scan promises another voice from the ashes. The discovery at Herculaneum is more than a technical triumph. It is a resurrection. The writers, Philodemus, Seneca, and others we have yet to name, were not just recording events. They were leaving a warning, born from a love for a world they saw in mortal danger. Their words, preserved by fire and resurrected by light, have survived the empire they described. They have resisted destruction, carrying a silent testament across 2 millennia. It's as if the scrolls themselves were determined to speak again, to tell their story from beneath the ash. And now that we can finally hear them, their echoes feel more relevant than ever. They remind us that history, even when buried, never truly loses its voice.